Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to start by saying welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening as we share some information about the proposed fire service fee that the city is considering. My name is Tim Grams. I'm the fire chief with the Statesboro Fire Department. I'd like to start by just letting everybody know we are recording tonight's meeting so that folks that may not have been able to join us this evening can get the information as we get it out to as many folks as we possibly can. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to share information about the fire service fee, how we're looking at utilizing it to help fund fire services in Statesboro. We also want to provide an opportunity for you to ask questions about the fee. With that, we're going to ask that questions be submitted in writing. We've provided some note cards, index cards, and pens in the back. That's going to do a couple of things for us. Number one, it'll allow us to read the questions so that it's clearly heard on the recording so that folks that watch it later can hear both the question and the response. And then it'll also help us develop future information as like frequently asked questions and things that we'll put up on a website and some other literature that we put out to the public. Staff will be available afterwards if anyone has any questions or concerns that they're not comfortable sharing publicly. But other than that, we're going to go ahead and kind of jump into it. Did I hit everything, Mr. Penny? All right. Before we jump into the actual fee itself, what did I do, Lane? There it goes. I felt like it would be good just to kind of give an overview of the fire department and fire service and what we do. Obviously, we respond to fires and provide suppression for structure fires, car fires, dumpster fires. We also do a lot of community risk reduction. So one of the philosophies that we have within the department is we try to be proactive, meaning that we try to prevent the fire, which is always the best approach in my opinion. We provide fire safety education, home safety checks. We do vehicle education within the city. We also have a hazardous material response team within the city. We do fire investigations, and then obviously we do disaster preparedness for hurricane storms, major events such as that. This slide just gives you a very broad overview of the history. We were established back in 1905, and then of course, slowly grew over the next 100 years or so. You can see where our staffing numbers have went up. Especially the last 10 to 20 years, we've really kind of ramped staffing up, and the ISO ratings, which I'll talk about just a little bit here shortly. The department is comprised of 3 divisions: administration, operations, and professional development, and then prevention. We're located out of 2 stations, but we have Station 3 currently being constructed, and we should be in that by the summer of this year, and looking forward to that. And we currently have 69 full-time certified personnel, a total staff of 75, and the difference there is a couple of administrative assistants as well as 4 dispatchers. We are an ISO Class 2. ISO is the Insurance Services Office, and they basically provide information regarding a community's risk for insurance companies to base their premiums off of that. Just a real quick lesson in ISO: the lower the number, the better the score, the better the insurance premiums. The Class 2 puts Statesboro in the top 5% of all fire departments across this nation. So we have a really top-notch fire department here in Statesboro, and our folks work really hard to maintain that. Our operational folks work 3 shifts, or there's 3 shifts of operational folks. They work a 48-hour on, 96-hour off schedule. We currently have a staff on each one of those shifts of 20 personnel. with a minimum staffing of 17. So 24/7, 365, there's at least 17 folks working at any given time. We staff 4 apparatus, 3 being engines, and the engine is basically what you typically think of when you think of a fire truck, and then 1 truck, which is the fire truck with the big ladder on top of it. The 4 personnel per apparatus is a huge thing. This is an NFPA standard, and NFPA is really the go-to source for fire service professional standards and set criteria. The four firefighters per apparatus allows us to immediately initiate interior operations on a structure fire. So what that means is as soon as a fire truck gets on scene, we do not have to wait for additional resources. We're able to immediately engage the fire in an aggressive manner, which makes a considerable difference in reducing the amount of damage that's caused. We also have 1 battalion chief that is on each one of those shifts. He serves as the shift supervisor and responds in a command vehicle. Just some general data points for the department. In 2025, we ran nearly 1,400 calls. We received just over $580,000 in federal funding. We experienced a 16% call increase in the city of Statesboro. Our staff had nearly 20,000 hours of training, installed nearly 140 smoke alarms, conducted almost 2,300 fire inspections. I'll come back to that property value preservation rate here in just a second, and then nearly 4,400 direct citizen interactions through education and outreach programs. The 99% property value preservation rate, so basically what that is when we go and say a house fire occurs, we go onto the Bullitt County Assessor's website and find out what the assessed value for that property was. And then based on the amount of damage, we assign a dollar amount that was estimated to be lost. So if we respond to a typical house fire and 25% of the residence was destroyed by the fire, we would basically take and calculate that out and put that in. We have a greater than 99% property value preservation rate, which is outstanding. We do a really good job of getting to the fires quickly, and our folks do an outstanding job of getting in there and taking care of the issue. The fire department budget obviously has been growing over the past several years. There's several reasons for this, but the main one being adding personnel. So again, as we add personnel, that adds to the cost of the fire service. 2 things that I did want to just mention that had pretty significant impacts on our budget. One is that we applied and received a SAFER grant, which is a FEMA grant that allowed us to hire 12 firefighters. So they funded those 12 positions for a 3-year period. August of this year, that grant expires. So we have to pick up the funding to maintain those 12 positions. That was a total of $2.1 million grant over a 3-year period. The other significant thing to note is that this past year, the county decided not to renew the agreement for us to provide fire services in the fire district, and that was generating roughly $2.5 to $2.75 million a year. This graph just basically shows that we have been adding personnel, and we have gotten to a point to where, again, we're able to meet the NFPA standards. That has greatly improved our efficiency and effectiveness on the fire ground. So again, that obviously adds to the budget as we move forward. So that's just kind of an overview of the fire department itself. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ed DiTomaso with GMC. He's the consultant that the city's been utilizing to help us navigate and figure out the fire fee and what it would look like here in Statesboro. NFPA, yes, sir. NFPA is the National Fire Protection Association, and again, it is just basically, it has a standard for everything within the fire service. Everything from response to how much water we should flow to, how we conduct education. So again, it's kind of they set the professional best practices and standards within the fire service. Thank you, Mr. Kenny. All right, Ed?
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. I'm Ed DiTomaso. I'm with Goodwood Mills in Cavewood. We're a local consulting firm. We're in Savannah. We've been helping communities throughout the Southeast with these types of fee studies. And so one of the first questions we typically get when we do a fire fee study is, well, my house has never burned, so why am I subject to this type of fee? And the hope is that the fire department never has to respond, to a fire at anybody's home. But the reality is that they need to stand ready 24/7 in the event that something does happen. And Chief kind of went through some of those additional services that they provide, but there is a benefit from having a fire department, and a fire department as good as the one that's here in Statesboro. One, that high ISO, well, low ISO rating helps your insurance premiums. Having a fire department that's as good as the one in the city also helps with the marketability of your property because you have fire service provided to you. So there's those direct benefits that you have from having the fire department, as well as all those indirect benefits that come from it. So how do people typically pay for fire service? There's really two primary methods of how these are typically funded in different cities. And it's through a user fee, similar to what we're talking about here tonight, but the other alternative is through property tax, which is very common too. There's also a lot of secondary funding sources that people use. These are sources of money that they can come in. It's a little bit less consistent. It helps supplement the budget of the fire department, but it's not something that you can count on an annual basis. So it really comes down to those two primary funding sources, and that's what our study was concentrated on. So looking at the fire budget over time, they are pulling from those other buckets and those secondary funding sources. They have a pull that they get from the water sewer fund. They also had that SAFER grant that Chief was talking about. Up until recently, they had the special service district from the county. So they had all this money that was coming in, and it was supplemented with general fund money. As a result of different circumstances, that's created this funding gap. They lost the SAFER grant, they lost that special service district, so there's a need to make up that money. This is not something the city has taken lightly, which is part of the reason they hired us to come in and do this study. So it really came down to two options for the city, is that they could raise millage to fund those operations and pick up that lost revenue, or they could explore this idea of a fire fee. So the reason people look at the fire fees is, one, it's one of the most equitable ways to distribute that cost onto the people in the city. Everybody's subject to the fee because it's based on a service that you receive. So tax exempt parcels are subject to a fire fee where they would not be subject to collecting taxes through a millage, as an example. So just kind of at a high level, the difference between a fee and a tax. A fee is based on a service that's received. So similar to water, sewer, sanitation, stormwater, you receive that service and you pay a fee for it. Similarly, in this concept, you're receiving fire protection services, and that would be a fee. Whereas taxes are collected into kind of that large pool and distributed out to multiple different groups within the city. Taxes tend to be a little bit less stable. There can be fluctuations in the market that would cause taxes to go down and up, whereas the fee is a stable revenue source that comes in. You can count on it because there's a certain structure on how it's collected. Another thing with a fee is are going to be opportunities for credits. So there's going to be different ways that you can get discounts on your bill by going and doing different things that help the fire department, that help fire safety, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. So some of the benefits, as I talked about, the biggest thing that I want to make here is that the city feels this is the most equitable way to distribute these costs. everybody pays. It would establish a special fund for all the money that gets collected through the fee. It goes into what's called an enterprise fund, and that money can only be used for fire-related costs. So unlike with a general fund allocation, things can change throughout the year where money might get moved around. Anything that's collected with a fire fee has to be used that way. So that also frees up some of the general fund money that it might be taking away. And ideally, this strategy may reduce the future property tax increase that they may have to look at. So there's a lot of advantages of looking through a fee versus a tax. So just a little background on what our study looked like. So we basically looked at the existing level of service of the fire department and tried to get some benchmark data. We looked at call data over a 5-year period of time and how that was distributed around the city. We also broke down that call data by different land use types just to see how is the city responding to different, when they're getting called, what type of calls are they responding to the most? And you can see here, about 71% of the fire department's calls are going to non-single family residential houses. So we factored this percentage in when we came up with our rate methodology to reflect that distribution, so it was passed on in the most equitable way. So then we broke down the call data based on those different types of land uses to see where was that highest volume of call and what they were responding to. And you can see here the highest one is multifamily dwellings, followed by dormitory, fraternity houses, restaurants, things that we wanted to factor in as we look through all these different options. So we also looked at and did a dive into the land use breakdown of the city. So we'd use the county's tax digest database and different tables that they have associated with that, so we could break down the city and look at how the general makeup was. So the yellow represents residential, which I'm calling single family residential, SFR, you'll hear me say. Commercial is what we're referring to, and commercial and exempt under our study is what we're calling non-single family residential. So anything that's not a single family house falls into that category, NSFR. And then we looked at undeveloped distribution. When you look at the way that this city's broken up, it's pretty interesting dynamic because almost 25% of the city is tax exempt property and total land area. So it's something that when you look at how to distribute this cost under a tax scenario, it's really placing the burden on a larger percentage of people that aren't paying taxes, that are paying the taxes to cover and supplement that fee for the people that aren't subject to paying a tax. So we say tax exempt, and I just wanted to kind of make it clear the types of facilities that fall into that category are churches, schools, universities, city buildings, county buildings. Those are all these different players that exist in the community that are under that tax exempt structure. So there's different ways that people throughout the state and other states collect a fire fee. There's a flat rate structure where just everybody pays the same thing. We didn't go that route because the whole reason we're exploring this is through a lens of equitability, and just charging everybody the same thing, as our data demonstrates, doesn't really make it fair. People also look at square footage based methodology, which I'm going to talk about in a second. The land use approach is where you've seen flat fees based on different land use categories, which also isn't necessarily come down to be the most equitable way by itself. There's a needed fire flow equation that they use that determines the amount of fire flow that would be needed to fight a fire based on the square footage and all this other criteria. And then there's ones where people just look at assessed value and charge a fee instead of a tax. Our approach kind of combined the land use and the square footage and put those into a hybrid methodology that I'm going to explain here a little bit more. So the way that the proposed fee would be broken down, it looks at the total square footage that's associated with a parcel. And that would includes not just your heated square footage, but any square footage that you have. So if you had an outbuilding, that would be part of it. Anything that could burn comes into that equation for the square footage. It looks at a rate, and then it adds it with the land area and then also another rate. So there's two separate rates that are coming together to make up that fee. So under our proposed rate structure here, we're looking at 1 cent per square foot, for residential, 2 cents a square foot for commercial, and you can also see that we have some built-in caps. And the reason we have those in there is because the fire department's gonna respond the same to a single-family property, whether it's larger or smaller. So at some point, they're coming with the same response, but we did wanna recognize some of the smaller properties that are gonna be easier to fight when they get there. So we did put a cap in there, and I'm gonna show you what that looks like. One of the other things that we wanted to factor in was just the ease of understanding the rate structure and how you can find out information about your property. So we relied on the Bullitt County Tax Digest, and if you use that Q Public site, you're able to go in there and look at your property card. And this is kind of where that information has been extracted. So this property card here, it shows a sketch of an example residential structure. Those are different square footages that are associated with that. So the middle one is that heated square footage, and they have porches and awnings that factor into that. So it totals 2,200 square feet times 1 cent. It actually caps out under this scenario, but then it has the acreage charge of $5. So this particular example shows that it would be a flat monthly rate of $20. So just kind of looking at it as it goes across the whole city, your average residential fee under this rate structure is about $19 a month. 63% of the residential properties are capped. That means that 37% of them are actually going to be below this number. So trying to break up and recognize the difference in sizes of parcels that have been distributed through the town. You can see on the non-single family side, the average is about 140 a month, and a smaller percentage of these are capped. So a lot of these are going to fall under that $300 range, where some of those larger square footages are going to cap out. So just to try to give you some real examples, we've taken a couple examples out of the property card here. You can see this one is located on Woodlawn on the left. Under the fee structure, it caps out at 20, as does the one on the left, on the right. Under a property tax scenario, and I failed to mention, the money that we're trying to raise to make up that gap is about $4 million. To do that through millage we need about 3.8 mils to equal the amount that we're trying to make up. So if the city did the fee approach, I'm showing you these numbers, the alternative is that 3.8 mils that's going to get you about the same amount. So that's what these numbers are based off. I meant to describe that earlier. But so under that millage approach, that same property at Woodlawn would be paying $36 a month in equivalent tax money. The one on the right has a higher assessed value. That one would be paying $60. The fire department is going to respond with the same force in that same unit to each of these properties, which is why we feel that this approach is more equitable when you look at it across the city. Just looking at a couple commercial examples, you have Wendy's. This is located on Northside Drive. Their fee for fire would be about $55, but their millage would be about $200. And then looking at the credit union, it shows it's got a little bit more square footage, which explains why that fee is a little bit higher for them, but their millage is approximately in a similar fashion to what Wendy's is. But in all of these scenarios, the fee is actually more beneficial to these customers than an equivalent millage. So we talked about the ability to get discounts at the beginning, and that's one of the things that makes a fee different than a tax, is that you have the ability to get discounts and credits. So we're in the process now of coming up with a credit manual where people would be able to apply and get discounts on their bill for different things that they do that go above and beyond to help with fire safety. So an easy one, for commercial customers would be that sprinkler system. Some of these are required to be put in place anyway. It recognizes that, it lessens their need for the fire department. It makes it easier for them when that sprinkler system kicks in, and if it's updated and maintained, they can get a discount for that. On the residential side, we have, a smoke detector, being able to demonstrate that you have an up-to-date smoke detector You'd be able to get a credit for that. Carbon monoxide if you have, natural gas in your structure, in your house. We also are working on looking at things to provide some relief to some of the tax exempt properties that wouldn't be used to paying a fee. So there's a prayer and preparedness program where churches can go through a certain thing through the fire department that would give them a discount. Educational training that can be folded into the curriculum at universities and high schools and elementary schools. So the idea is to try to make these credits and discounts available to anybody that might want one and want to go through the process of applying. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I want to just give you a couple of our next steps. We do have some additional meetings. We're going to start to try to continue to get the word out. We'll set up a web page where people can use as a landing page to get information and to keep track of when other opportunities for meetings might be. We're going to be meeting with some key customers and just trying to educate them on what this might look like. So stay tuned for some more information, and then we'll be happy to try to address any of the questions that have come in.
Okay, so we're gonna look and see if we have any questions. Does anybody have any other questions that they want to submit? Ms. Lindsay's gonna come up with.
So how much is this system going to generate per year?
It'll cover 50% of the fire department's budget.
So it's going to
Roughly.
generate about
About $4 million.
$4 million.
Yep.
So where's the other?
So right now, the fire department would still be supplemented through a general fund contribution to make up the gap. How would that be paid for? That's already being paid for through regular taxes.
So it would be tax payable and fee both,
Under that, yeah, under that
and
proposed.
that's allowed under Georgia law in ports
Yep.
that have been through.
It is.
Isn't it getting some money from S-Plus?
I don't know the SPOS scenario. Well, let's address the questions that.
So the first question is, the Statesboro SPOS generates plus or minus 138 million over a 6-year period. Could a special fire SPOS at half be continuous and therefore annually fund the fire department?
So my understanding of SPOS and is it's not able to be used for operations. So SPOS can be used for a lot of things, and it could be one of those secondary funding sources that I talked about, but it can't solely be the mechanism for funding the department.
There are many cities around the U.S. that have a fire SPOS.
And they may, and I'm not saying, but it's not used to pay staff. It's not used to pay for the general operation. It could be used to fund capital projects such as a fire station, but it wouldn't, I don't know if I'm speaking out of it.
Yeah, and I will add that currently all of our major capital are funded through SPOS. So all of our fire trucks are purchased with SPOS. The fire station 3 that we're currently constructing has been paid through SPOS. So we do utilize SPOS dollars, but currently the way SPOS is set up for us is it can't be used for operational or everyday uses such as staffing and things of that nature. It can only be capital projects. Now, I'm not familiar with other towns or communities that may have an additional SPOS that can be utilized in that way, but currently that's the way it is in Statesboro. Yep.
Will the fire department use long-term capital budgeting for 5 years plus?
Say again.
Will the fire department use long-term capital budgeting for 5 years plus?
I mean, we do capital budgeting out 5+ years currently. Yes, not sure if that's answering the question fully, but yes, we do budget capital projects.
Are fire impact fees going to be used for buildings and equipment?
We currently do not have any impact fees that I'm aware of within the city, and including a fire impact fee.
The next question, will rates also be collected from Georgia Southern University?
Yes, under the fire fee structure, all properties would be subject to the fee, including Georgia Southern.
So I think this says is the, I don't know what that is. It sounds like, is this being dropped in lieu of fee based? I don't know whose question this is.
You know, we'll come back to it.
The next question, having been before, so this is in reference to garbage cans. Ms. Sue, what was your question?
My question is, why are we gonna make a change and have more taxes without representation? We've come before the city before on drainage, for drainage, that's not being addressed. We've come before the city on the city garbage cans, and that's not, the compliance department only has two people, Charles Brown and Shay Thompson. And so, I mean, how can you do something other than just taxation without really having people doing the job? You know, this city should look just as good as Mr. Penny and our mayor. You know, it should be just tip-top shape because we are taxed. And you need to see some changes and improvements.
Did you have a fire-specific question?
Well, one more thing, if we're not going to, we haven't done what we already passed and taxed on. We're taxed on drainage, but we're not.
Again, Ms. Parker, we appreciate you being here, but this evening, we're gonna talk about fire services.
Right.
You're talking about roll-out carts and things of that nature. Again, this is all about fire service fee.
Right.
If you have a
But
question
I am
about
for it
fire.
100%.
If you have,
I'm for it 100%, but I wanna see other things taken care of, not just more taxes.
we understand, but again, tonight,
Okay.
what we're talking about is fire service fee. That's what we want to make sure that we're talking about.
How is it working in Savannah?
So they don't charge it. But I will just differentiate this, and we are talking about a fee and not a tax. And I know we can use them sometimes interchangeably, but they're, in the case that we're talking about, there's a difference.
So the next question, the presentation slides includes that Wendy's and Core Credit Union are non-single family residential. Are those saying these are residential or are these considered commercial?
So they're commercial. The fee is gonna be basically anything that's not a house falls into the other category. So anything that's not a duplex or a house essentially is considered non-single family. That would include public, so city buildings, county buildings, schools, industrial facilities, commercial facilities, restaurants, anything that's not a single family structure.
And just to expand on that from the fire side of that, so basically the response changes pretty significantly when you're dealing with a single family dwelling versus multifamily or commercial building. So that's the difference when we didn't want to have 5 or 6 different categories. It's basically when we look at the fire response and the resources needed, it's pretty standard for single family dwellings, but then a lot more is needed typically with commercial or larger buildings. So that's where we got to the single family dwelling and non-single or non-residential buildings.
So the next question, since ISO class 1, 2, and 3 are commercial and industrial, and class 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and 9 are residential, ISO class 10 is not considered as protected, will there be additional costs associated with commercial rates, primarily Will it be primarily covered by the commercial industrial users?
Okay, so when it comes to ISO, a couple of things to note. One, ISO is a private entity. It is not a government regulation or service that is has oversight by any government agency. What this business essentially does is they come in and they look at a community's risk, and then they measure the community's ability to mitigate that risk and then assign. So, as insurance, in the insurance terms, I'm not an insurance expert by any means, but basically, the higher the risk, the more typically you would charge on a premium. Where it gets very difficult to kind of sort out is that they sell that information to individual insurance companies, okay? And then each individual insurance company utilizes that rating differently. Some weigh it more, some weigh it less, some, may not weigh it at all. So it's really hard to say what the individual insurance company, if your ISO improved or worsened, how much that would affect the premium. When we're talking about scores, your class 1s, 2, 3 basically are for residential are going to be for the most part the same. They're not going to have you're not going to see a huge reduction in insurance going from a class 2 to a class 1 for residential. The one going from the 3 to the 2 to the 1 is going to be more impactful for your commercial buildings. And that's just because, again, once you get down, you're really talking about fire suppression systems and things of that nature. So, again, ISO can be a little confusing. We recently just went through an evaluation. We have not received those findings back yet, but the Class 10 is unprotected. Every building, every property in the city of Statesboro is a Class 2. So your insurance company should credit you as having Class 2 fire protection, and that should be reflected in your insurance premiums. But again, each insurance company charges a little differently because I've tried to call around and see specifically, hey, if we were a Class 4, what's the difference between Class 4 and Class 2? They can't even provide that information. And again, I don't know how much of that ties back into the actual ISO rating schedule, but again, they simply just sell the information to the insurance companies, and then the insurance companies utilize that data however they want. The lower your score, the lower your insurance premiums, and that's pretty consistent. How much is really dependent upon the individual insurance.
So I have two more questions. The first question, has the city considered moving back to a protection level within the city only and roll back the millage rate? What was the decision and why?
So I can tell you that the protection class, I don't think there's a way to request or intentionally roll back the protection classes. Again, what ISO is looking at is how effective your fire protection is. What are your response time? How well are your personnel trained? Your policies and procedures, your practices, things of that nature is what determines your ISO score. For us to I guess receive a lower classification or a higher classification, however you want to look at it, you would have to reduce the service, and I think that certainly would not be productive. Again, we have worked really hard to get the service to a point now that we feel is sustainable and provides an adequate level of protection. Again, you could go to another neighborhood that has the exact same number of staff, exact same number of stations and trucks, and they may be a Class 5. Because again, the ISO is looking more at the operation and how effective the emergency service is, not what you have. So I think that's important to understand is that that's not something that you typically can, intentionally manipulate, I guess, is the best way I can put that.
And the last question, how is the city dealing with the reduction of service area and duties with the subtraction of the unincorporated county fees from the cost to provide services? So I'll read it again. How is the city dealing with the reduction of service area and duties with the subtraction of the unincorporated fees from the county and cost to provide services?
So I think the intent of that question is basically have we looked at not if we're not being used as much or running as many calls because we don't have that district, why are we not sure? So the whole premise behind the fire district and that agreement with Bullitt County is when you look at ISO, they look at a 5-mile radius around your fire stations. Basically, if you're within 5 miles, ISO considers that to be within a reasonable response distance. So any property that's within 5 miles is eligible for that credit. If you are more than 5 miles, then you get the Class 10 designation because they feel that anything beyond 5 miles is too much at risk. Okay. Statesboro, and the good thing about the agreement is that it allowed the citizens or the cost of the fire service to be spread out over a larger tax base and sharing that cost. But just because we're no longer servicing the district, our services were based for what was needed in the city. We run 3 engines and a truck because that is what is needed in the city of Statesboro. The folks in the fire district were able to receive the benefits of our ISO classification and our services, and we certainly responded and provided the same level of service. But again, that just because we're no longer covering that area does not mean that the need does not still exist in Statesboro. I understand that sometimes it's difficult. Fire service is one of those core services that you hope you never need, but you want it to really be a top-notch service if you need it. And again, we look at the potential and what we need to be prepared for and how we're going to respond and mitigate those incidences. That's where our training, our staffing numbers, our response policies and procedures, all that comes into play to make sure that we are delivering the best possible service to the citizens in the community.
That was the last question.
That was the last question.
I'm gonna take something away.
Does anybody have any other questions or had a question that we didn't read?
This gentleman had a question, I'm not sure you answered this question. Sorry.
And we'll be here, like we said, if you have individual questions for either me or Chief.
Sorry, I'm sorry. You had a question about FLOSS?
SPLOST, the funding fire services through SPLOST. I'm not sure. Well, again, I appreciate everybody coming out. I appreciate the questions. Again, I know that this is, something that we want to make sure that you have the correct information and answer your questions the best that we can. So again, we appreciate you coming out tonight, and we have several members of the staff that are around to answer any questions that you may have afterwards or want to leave some contact information or anything such as that.
Tim?
Yes, sir.
Please stress that this is not the only.
That's right. We're going to do several more community information meetings. We're in the process of putting a website together with this information and questions and different information. So again, we're gonna continue to post on social media and all the different ways that Lane communicates for the city to get the information out. And again, encourage anybody that you speak with that has questions or concerns to attend one of those meetings or to reach out. Because again, we want to be transparent, we want to be open, and want to make sure that we're getting the correct information to individuals before, a final decision is made.
And the final thing I'd ask, council has two ways to fund this. Do you want me to address it?
Sure. Why don't you come on up here, Mr. Penny?
Good evening, I'm Charles Penny, I'm the city manager of Statesboro. So when we are looking at how we pay for fire protection, we have a couple of options. We either can implement a fire service fee, or we can look at the millage rate. And when Ed was making this presentation, we just want to be clear. So as you're talking to your council members, you might want to express what your thoughts are. The fire service fee, which if implemented, would be implemented in July, would be July 1. We paid for this year's fire service through use of funds, loans from other funds in order to be able to fund our fire department this year. As a result of losing the $2.5 million that we were receiving from the county, plus we had the SAFER fund. So when the SAFER funds will go away this year, that's $3.2 million that we have to provide for. And so either we use a fire service fee, or we need to look at a millage rate increase. And I think Ed said it's 3.8 mills if we want to use the millage rate increase. Again, the thought about the fire service fee is how equitable is the fire service fee? There are some entities that will not pay a millage rate. So that means the burden goes on those that pay the millage rate to pay for the fire protection. And so we have a department that we have to fund, and so one way or the other, we have to pay for it. And if people don't want to implement a fire service fee, they need to let their council members know. But you also at the same time have to recognize how we're going to pay for it. And the only other source that we have available to us would be the millage rate. Unfortunately, in Bullock County and in Statesboro, there's a fund that we don't have available to us. And it's called the local option sales tax. Some 40-some years ago, the fathers of both, and I'm saying fathers, there were probably more men than women at that time, the county commissioner and the city council, they couldn't agree about how to use those local option sales tax. So the local option sales tax are not available to the city or the county. They go to the school systems. So those funds can't be used to help fund our fire operations. This is all about how we fund the Class 2 fire department that we have available in the city of Statesboro. And so I just want to stress, if you need to let your council members know, and they're not getting ready to make a decision today, but between now and July 1, they will need to make a decision so that we know how we're going to fund the fire department.
About, someone asked me about SPLOST, Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax. In Georgia, it can only be used for capital
items, right.
Right.
So we have SPLOST, and that's a special purpose. That's for, you have to approve the use of it, and it's basically used to pay for capital items. It's a great thing for our cities and counties to have, because when it comes to having police cars, fire trucks, paying for a fire station, all that equipment, that's what we can use SPLOST for. But you can't use any of that SPLOST to pay firefighters.
They do that in other cities and other states.
Yeah, but not in Georgia. The only other fund that we have, that's it. We have FLOSS. Now y'all just approved FLOSS, okay? And that's the floating local option sales tax. That we are now collecting that starting in January of this year. Those funds will be available to us in July of 2027, okay? And so what will happen on July 1 of 2027 the city will have available, and this is an estimated amount, roughly $3.5 million that will come to the city, okay? The county will receive about $15 million, okay? But when we receive that $3.5 million, what we have to do is we have to reduce our millage rate by the $3.5 million. It does not enhance, it simply replaces the revenue that we get from the millage rate. So we then have to reduce our millage rate down. So right now we're at 8.625, okay? So when that millage rate, when the floss comes in, our 8.625 will go down to something like 5 point whatever. But if we increase the millage rate, instead of looking at, if we don't implement the fire service fee, increase the millage rate 3.8 mils, we'll go from 8.625 to somewhere, I'm not that fast with math, somewhere north of 11 mils. Yeah. And then come July next year, we'll roll that back and we'll be right back at 8.625. But then again, the folks, the exempt properties will not pay anything toward fire service at all.
I guess my question was more around, I think, something I posed to Ed a little bit earlier. And it's dealing with the fire fee versus ad valorem. But the question I asked earlier was, does it replace the ad valorem? So it's really a hybrid. You're still keeping ad valorem for the fire department plus the fire fee.
It's a hybrid.
Okay, so I think everybody would love to know that, because it sounds to me when you're looking at this as though we're replacing it, but
Yeah.
we're not actually replacing it. And so I think that's an important factor when we talk to our elected officials, to know that we're not doing that. Now, why didn't the city consider that, or is that an option that's on the table to completely take the fire department out of the ad valorem tax realm completely and